Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Mixed Faith Marriage Mastermind. This is one of my favorite times the of the month where we get together and talk about mixed faith marriage topics. I am Chris Rich. We've got Brooke Booth and Suzette Halterman on here as well. And we are all coaches and we all work with people that are in mixed faith marriages. We all have very different perspectives. We have varying levels of faith. And we are all in mixed faith marriages and families ourselves. So we are right here in the trenches with you. So today we are going to be talking about expectations. And if you think about it, from a young age, we start absorbing all sorts of different ideas about how life is supposed to look. So look at fairy tales and Disney movies and all the things that we've seen growing up. Then we look at all the people around us, our parents, our families of origin, our ward members, and all these things contribute to the expectations that we carry into adulthood. And we have expectations based on our own experiences, our culture, laws, commandments, media, social norms, preferences, and more. There are a whole bunch of things that help us to create the expectations that we have. And these expectations or the beliefs and assumptions we hold about how life should be, they shape the way we approach relationships, careers, faith, and everything else in our lives. So, whether we realize it or not, our expectations influence our emotions, the way we behave, and our reactions, especially when they go unmet. So, today we are going to be diving into all things expectations and exploring how they show up in our mixed faith marriages and our families and discussing ways to navigate them with more awareness and hopefully a little more flexibility. So, to start off, we always start off with kind of a personal question. So, my first question, what are some of the expectations you had for your marriage? And were they realistic or not?
So I'll jump in here. So I was thinking that I had expectations like that. I remember this is one that I just took me years to let go of, that we would spend weekends and vacations like being together. I expected that. Certainly wasn't the case. That this is one I totally had, that we would always be in the church, that I would always be in the church. Completely an expectation I had when we got married. And here's another one. I'll just add one more, that being a wife and a mother would be very satisfying, and that would make me very happy. These were all expectations I had that were probably none of which realistic and none of which actually ended up being true.
I agree. My first reaction to that question, Chris, is like, oh, so many expectations. I had so many unrealistic expectations, and that's part of being young and not based in reality all the time. But same, Brooke, like expectations that we would spend all of our time together and praise each other all the time. And then that my husband wouldn't want to go do things with other people. He would just want to hang out with me. Just a lot of expectations that were really codependent, like that my husband would be responsible for my happiness. Just so many expectations that are based in unhealthy relationships because our society models very enmeshed, codependent relationships. And so I had a lot of unhealthy expectations, not a lot of education or understanding of what a healthy marriage is. So yeah, I was chocked full of unrealistic expectations.
Well, I think we're all in good company, and our listeners probably are as well, because I have a lot of unrealistic expectations too. I had this idea that when we got married, life was going to be so easy. That was definitely something I thought. I thought we would always get along. I totally thought that he would be just like me and that we would be on the same page, that we would like the same things, would believe the same things, and that we'd want to hang out with each other all the time and just be like joined at the hip. And I could go on and on and on with a lot more expectations. And no, they were not realistic at all. It's been more of this, We've had a lot of wonderful ups and some pretty hard downs. So it's a lot of times where we really like each other and sometimes we kind of bug each other. And so, yeah, it wasn't that perfectly synced all the time. Okay, my second question. So this is more on the mixed faith stuff. Many couples enter marriage assuming shared faith will always be part of their relationship. How does a faith transition affect those expectations?
As I mentioned earlier, I definitely had this expectation, and I would even consider it as more like a mandate or a non-negotiable. That's probably very much how I viewed it, and probably how my husband viewed it. So when these things do happen, it can really, like, that's a big deal to be faced with your non-negotiables. It's a big deal to look at them and consider, like, are these non-negotiables or are they just unrealistic expectations? And figuring out the difference between the two is not easy. I would say how I was socialized was I wasn't distinguishing between the two. Like, so long as if it was a social expectation, I just sort of lumped it as a non-negotiable in many regards. Certainly something like church. And it can be a lot of work to really dive deep into your own person and decide what truly is a non-negotiable and what is just an unrealistic expectation. And I will say, as the person who's had the faith transition, it's okay if faith in church and all of that is a non-negotiable. Like, that's something anybody gets to choose. There's not a right, like, just because we're here having this podcast and having these experiences in life doesn't mean that the way we've decided is what's best for everybody, or quote unquote right. It's just what we have come to conclude personally.
Yeah, I think when one spouse goes through a faith transition, it really brings out that expectation was there. And I think a lot of times we don't even realize that we have that expectation. I mean, growing up in the LDS church, it's explicit. Counsel, marry a returned missionary, marry a strong priesthood holder, marry someone who's strong in their faith, right? It's explicit and it's also implicit. I can think of many families growing up during testimony meeting or talks, they would just be sad and wishing that their non-believing kids or spouses or whoever would come back or convert or join the church or whatever. So there was just so much messaging, explicit, implicit, just absorbed, that created that expectation for me. If you're in the faith, that you will stay in the faith. And if you marry somebody, my husband served a mission, I served a mission. If you marry a returned missionary, they're going to be solid for life. There's just so many of those expectations. And then a faith transition just shines a light on that to show, oh, we have these expectations that you are not going to change for life, and that your spirituality was set and not going to go anywhere. And it just really brings that to the forefront. And then none of us really knew what to do with that. Like, oh, we had these expectations and things have changed. Now what do we do? It's hard.
Really hard, and it feels really scary because it's like the church provides this safety net. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but we never had the conversation like, okay, I expect you to always want to go to church. Like, these were not things that we talked about. It was just, these kind of assumed. So when that safety net is no longer there, it can be really scary. And that does not feel safe at all for your nervous system. Our nervous systems are constantly scanning for safety and danger. And when those, with a faith transition, that definitely feels very dangerous to your nervous system. And with that, there's so many different emotions that come up: worry, fear, anger, betrayal, and grief, definitely, because it's like, wait, and that's what we were talking about last month, grief on either side for the believing or the non-believing spouse. And I think it's important to point out too that grief is the loss of an expected outcome, an expectation, and or a change that we didn't want. So I think it can bring up a lot of these different things and all sorts of questions that you never thought you were going to be asking, or conversations that that we probably never expected. So yeah, definitely some things to think about there. Okay, what are some common unrealistic expectations in mixed faith relationships, and how can couples shift towards more flexible, supportive ones?
So let's talk a little bit more about expectations. I consider them like the unwritten rules. They're the unspoken rules. They're the supposed to, the shoulds. In coaching, my training was like we called them a manual. They were like the instruction manual that everybody understood, and they were so obvious. They were just like how the world works, what's right and what's true. So a lot of times we don't even recognize we have expectations. Like they're just how it is, how things function. And so even like common unrealistic expectations, we'll list some here, but a lot of times they're just the rules. They're just things that we don't question. They just are how it is. So tithing, like it's necessary for financial health or safety. Coffee is bad for you or means you're unworthy. If you don't go to church on Sunday, it means you're lazy or you're not a good person. Kids should definitely go to church. That's important to their development and to their ability to be good people and to grow into healthy adults. These are all expectations that I certainly carried for years because they're just the rules. And the rules become your expectations. Like, because if you're taught this is what you need to do this and this creates this, if this, then that, those are all expectations. They're guarantees, if you will. There's so many ways we have language around talking about our expectations. It can be like if you read the Book of Mormon every day, then your kids will always be righteous. Like there's so many of these expectations or these guarantees or these unwritten rules or very obviously spoken and written down rules, however you want to do it. So when you start to shift into a mixed faith marriage, you really need some flexibility around this. And we've talked to our adaptability podcast is one that I think about all the time. I think it was such a rich podcast as we were talking about like how to be adaptable, how to be flexible. Really, it's how to deal with your expectations that are unmet, how to deal with those manuals that people aren't following, how to deal with that. And I will definitely refer back to that one because I think we talked about some really good stuff there. But just to answer your question here and now, first you need to just start being aware of what expectations are. Because we just don't even know. We're just like, duh, of course, this is how it should be done without putting the label that that's an expectation on it so that we can then do the analysis of like, well, is that an expectation I want to continue in my life, in my marriage, in this family?
Love all of that. I have a long list of common realistic expectations. So here's some. I had to stop myself before it got too long. That my spouse will value what I value. That my spouse will prioritize what I prioritize, that my spouse will come to the same conclusions if they have the same information as me, that I will be my spouse's highest priority, that my spouse will not change, that my spouse will meet all of my emotional needs and will always be a safe place for me to share all my thoughts or feelings, that my spouse is my best friend and I should be able to tell them anything that I think or feel, that my spouse should be able to maintain complete composure while I criticize something that they love, or that my spouse should be able to maintain complete composure while I share my love for the church when they don't, that my spouse is responsible for my happiness and well-being, and I could go on and on. So I think a big part of developing more healthy expectations, more supportive, more flexible expectations, a lot of it is education about what healthy relationships are. So here are some more, I would call them healthier, realistic expectations, that my spouse has a different set of values, priorities, and needs than me, and they're going to make different choices than I would. My spouse will not see things the same way as I do, even when given the same information. My spouse is not an extension of me. They will do things their own way, always. There will be loneliness in a healthy relationship, and that's normal. We will always have fundamental differences. All marriages do. We will not see eye to eye on a lot of major things. Our differences will exist the entirety of our marriage. But here's one. This is a quote from Dr. Gottman. He says, it's a myth that if you solve your problems, you'll automatically be happy. We need to teach couples that they'll never solve most of their problems. So I think that's a good, more healthy expectation. We won't solve most of our problems. We're going to live in differences our whole marriage. And that's normal. And happiness doesn't come from eliminating differences. So what a different set of expectations, if everybody was educated on healthy relationships and could develop this different set of expectations, what a difference it would make for everyone. It made a difference for me when I learned these healthier, more realistic expectations.
Hindsight is always 2020. So going back to what Brooke was saying about the manual, I think that's something that it's an exercise I have my clients go through and to actually write down the specific things. And I love the question, describe what they would be like if you had a magic pill that could make them behave however you wanted. And to write down all of those things without editing it, without judging it, just getting it all out there. I remember doing this once and I was like, wow, I have this list of one thing, of my expectations, and then I have this person that's totally different. And I love thinking about when we have expectations or a manual for someone, it's kind of like we are reading the script instead of watching the actual play that is being performed in front of us. And so it's like, wait a minute, you weren't supposed to say that then, or that's not the way this was supposed to look. So we're not enjoying this. I mean, imagine you're at a Broadway performance, and instead of watching the beautiful performance in front of you with all the costumes and the music, you're sitting there looking there at the script saying, wait a minute, this isn't right. And I love thinking of it that way because I spend a lot of my time doing that, that I wasn't getting to know him. And what we end up doing is we love the person we want them to be and not the person they really are. So we are in love with a different version of them when we're trying to make them meet all these expectations and stick to our manual. So I love that play analogy, and I think of that often, like, oh, I'm in the script again. This isn't the play. So it's a good reminder. Okay, how do unspoken expectations impact our interactions with our spouse and family members, and what strategies can we use to navigate them?
So I call this the guess what's in my head game. And I think it's a terrible game. It's not fair. But I want to add a caveat to this. So like, don't play the guess what's in my head game. It's not fun for an employee and employer. It's not fun for a husband and his wife. It's not fun for a parent and a child. It's not fun for siblings. It's just not a fun game. But what I see happening too, like, let's not play the game, but this is the extra piece I want to add. What I sometimes see happening is that, like, let's say a husband and wife, say one of the partners is actually very good at communicating. They're not requiring their partner to guess what's in their head. They're actually saying what needs to be said. That doesn't always mean the other person receives that or hears that or considers that. So when I say don't play the guess what's in your head game, I don't want everybody out there to assume that they're all playing that game. Some of you are amazing at communicating and you do share all the things that need to be shared. I don't want you to hear this and beat yourself up for not communicating enough. A lot of you really are amazing communicators and you're sharing all the things that need to be shared. And maybe the work in the relationship needs to be around how those are received or how those are dealt with. So I'm going to say don't play the guess what's in the head game with that extra caveat, because I don't know how many clients I've had and they're always like, oh, I should have said that better. I should have said that differently. I should have said it this way instead of that way. And I'm like, the way you said it is perfect. It was fine. You were very effective. This is no longer like your responsibility. You communicated very effectively. When we always try to reframe and say it another way because we think they'll receive it differently, that's a reception problem, not a communication problem.
I agree with that. I love this quote by Brene Brown. She says, expectations are resentments waiting to happen, or something like that. And I think when we have these unspoken expectations, or these expectations we don't even know are there, because we're living life, our expectations, we always have them all the time. But whenever we start to feel frustration with another person or resentment, usually that's a sign of, I have some sort of expectation here, and have I even communicated that, what I really want to happen? And most of the time we haven't, because again, we're on autopilot and our expectations underlie so much. So that's just something I notice within myself. These unspoken expectations impact relationships is resentment, frustration, annoyance, because it means I've got an agenda in my head. Like I love your analogy, Chris, like the script. I've got a script in my head that I didn't even know I had, and you're not following it, and now I'm frustrated with you. So that's when I usually have to remind myself, oh yeah, this is a different person with a different brain, different experience, and they are doing things different than me. Okay, let me let go of some of my expectations here and communicate more of what I'm looking for, what I'm hoping to have happen. Yeah.
My husband and I will even joke about like, I'll say like, wait a minute, you're not doing this the way I'm expecting you to do it. According to my manual, it looks like this. And, we'll joke around on funny things like how, like what direction the silverware should be, or, little things that don't really matter. And I think it is good to point out, like, wait a minute, you're not following this, and I probably haven't even told you of what this looks like. I think it's really important to, I don't know about you, but there are so many times where I'm like, they should just know. He should just know not to do that or not to say that. And I think anytime we catch ourselves thinking they should just know, they don't. That is an expectation that we probably should share, because let's not assume that people just know. And I think also, as to what you were saying, Brooke, that sometimes we are communicating those. And I think it is very important that we make requests. We can make all the requests that we want. In fact, I highly recommend making requests. And we don't want to hang our happiness on whether or not they meet that request, because it may be something that they're, like it's not in line with their values or how they want to do things. So I think it's really important to, yeah, that we don't hang our happiness on a met request. Okay, what's an expectation you've had to let go of, and how did that impact your relationship?
Well, like we were talking about earlier, we've plenty, 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 plenty. I'll talk about one and then I'll talk about like the tool that helps me the most in this particular area. So the one, and this one I'm guessing most people can relate to, but like he'll want to know my wants and needs and meet them, like, and mind you, meet them like perfectly, like meet them like like somebody who's highly skilled at this. And that's an expectation I had. And the skill I had to bring to bear there was, one, recognize it, like have some awareness around that. Then I had to really learn how to take ownership for my own wants and needs. Like it's my life, my wants, my needs, my responsibility. Now that doesn't mean I can't make tons of requests or have a lot of communications around my preferences and around my needs and my wants. And I think that's important and that should happen. But fundamentally, I'm responsible for that. And if I'm just waiting around for him to get on board and become like the chairman of the committee of Brooke's wants and needs, that's my job. I'm the chairman of that committee. And this was like Suzette was speaking to this earlier, like we expect, like, take my happiness and now it's yours to manage. That's maybe a little bit reckless even of how we're dealing with our own happiness and our own wants and our own needs and our preferences and all those things. I had to learn to like take ownership of that back and have me be the person in charge of that. And again, I can make requests of him. It doesn't mean he does nothing, but I'm the person who needs to be ultimately accountable and responsible for that.
I think for me, an expectation that I've had to let go of I mean, I've had to let go of lots, but specifically in the mixed faith marriage is that my husband should value what I value, right? Like that he should care about church history, that he should care about how women are impacted in the church, that he should value all those things. He doesn't. And when I let go of that, like those are my values. He values other things, and he is not an extension of me. So when I could let go of that, like he is not an extension of me. He has a different brain. He has different experiences that have shaped him. He has his own things that he values. And I had to let go of that expectation that he should value what I value, that he should be interested in something just because it was upsetting me or interesting to me, that he should want to read all the things I'm reading. That's a huge one I see for mixed faith marriage, right? They should want to read what I'm learning. They should be interested in what I'm learning and what I'm sharing, and just letting go of that. Like, No, who says they should be interested in that? They're their own person. I don't know what they should be interested in. I don't know what they should value. So when I let go of that, it made a big difference in my own marriage of you value what you value. I value what I value. I don't expect you to value the same things that I do because you're a different person than me.
For me, an expectation that I needed to let go of was that my husband or that my kids, that they would change or that they would be different or that they would fit my script, that they would follow my script because they were doing a terrible job at it and it was just making me more and more upset. And so just this idea that I think one of the most valuable expectations that I let go of was to quit expecting people to be different than they are. That was something I spent so much time trying to change and to control and to manipulate. And I just, yeah, if we can quit expecting people to be different than they are and to expect them to be exactly as they are, I think that changes everything. And then you get to decide what you want to do with that information. But having this expectation that people are going to change can be really very, very tricky. And I have a lot of people that when I share that with them, they're like, well, Chris, am I supposed to just drop all my expectations? And I think the quick answer is only if you want to feel better. There's, I think of it as there's a space between reality and our expectations. And in that space is a lot of suffering. So I think it's we may not be able to change reality, but we have some wiggle room with our expectations. So I think letting go of expectations is actually a gift for me when I do that. Let's see. How do we know when it's time to adjust, communicate, or let go of an expectation?
So I like what you were just saying. I think it's like now, always, like yesterday. Like it's our expectations unchecked, unaware, they can steamroll us. They can like lead us around like our chain gets yanked a lot when we're not aware of what they are. So it's time to adjust, communicate, or let go of expectations. Like it's at least it's time to learn about what your expectations are. It's time to make that list Chris talked about. It's time to like get curious about that. And then what I like to do with my clients at this point is I like to say, okay, here are your expectations. Good to know. We see them now. What are your values? And this is something I talk about a lot. I probably talked about it here. I know I've talked about it with my clients all the time. Is like, what are your values? And when I ask that question, I do not mean like list out all the values that you were taught were values, you know, faith, hope, charity, divine nature, individual worth, knowledge, choice, and accountability. Like we know those values, the young woman values, the Boy Scout values, but like, what are your values? And this takes a little bit of curiosity and exploration and openness to really like, what do I value? Not what have I been told to value, but what do I value? And if I have a value and it lines up very nicely with an expectation as something that's like non-negotiable, I want in my life, then that's not an expectation so much as it's a value. And you want to live according to your values. And you can label it appropriately. Okay, this isn't so much an unknown or unspoken expectation. It's a value that I want to live my life on. I really like to do this kind of work because you can let go of the expectations that are just other people's ideas or other people's, you know, important to other people. But when you start to put them as your values, and then you can own it as truly something that's important to you, and this is a high priority value or a medium or a low priority value, then you can start to make decisions around the life you want to create, or what you're okay with and what you're not okay with, and what you're comfortable with and not comfortable with, what you're willing to put up with and what you're not willing to put up with, what you want to be flexible around and what you don't want to be flexible around. Because flexibility isn't a super great skill, but you don't want to be flexible around everything. Like I certainly wouldn't be flexible if my, somebody wanted to have like an AK-47 in my house. I would just be like, yeah, I'm just not going to be flexible around that. I'm just not going to be. because that's one of my values, not because it's right or wrong. It's just because that's how I want to live my life. So doing this type of work around your expectations, communicating them and questioning them and being flexible around them and all of this, you have to know yourself. You have to be honest with yourself. You have to really take the time to figure out what your values are and then how you make decisions based on that and how you live your life based on that. And I say this very carefully. That doesn't mean that's necessarily how you used to do it. Maybe it is. It might look very, very, very similar. It might look completely different. Just give yourself permission to ask those types of questions if that's something you want to work on.
I completely agree. And I want to add something to that along that same line and to something you mentioned, Chris, about your client saying, well, do I just drop all my expectations? So, around this question of how do you know when to drop expectations and adjust expectations, let go of them? Well, are they about something that someone else should do? If your expectation is about something that you have no control over, what another person should do, value, prioritize, think, feel, how they should live their life, then drop that. You have no control over that. Maintain expectations that are about yourself. Like I expect myself to be in a collaborative relationship. Like that's an expectation that I have for myself. And if the relationship does not feel collaborative to me, I will leave it, right? That's in my control. I expect myself to be in a mutually respectful relationship. I have a standard for myself around that, like that I'm not willing to tolerate a relationship that's not respectful. So I can control that. I can leave that relationship, so I have expectations for myself about, like you mentioned, Brooke, what are you willing to tolerate? What are you not willing to tolerate based on your values? That's all in my control. If the expectation is about what other people should or shouldn't do, you have no control over that. So those are, drop all those expectations. Only have expectations around what you are willing to tolerate, what you're not willing to tolerate, how you are going to live your life, how you are going to engage with other people. And because that's all you can control ultimately.
I think sometimes going back to that idea that I shared earlier, that suffering is the space between reality and expectations. I think if we notice that we are constantly suffering, that is an important thing. I think sometimes we take our expectations that we have and that are not met, and it's kind of like it's a cactus that we just have these expectations and we want to hold on to them, but it's kind of like we're hugging this prickly cactus and we're saying, ouch, this hurts, this expectation is not being met over and over and over and over again. And we can either keep hugging the cactus, or we can look at it and say, you know what? I don't have to hold on to this. I can either let go of this expectation, or I'm free to choose what I want to do within the relationship. But I think a lot of times that when we recognize that our expectations are causing us pain, we don't want to punish ourselves for our person being themselves. So I like to look at and I'm going to repeat that. Don't punish yourself for them being themselves. So that's a good way to determine if you should adjust, communicate, or let go of an expectation. Okay, we've talked about a lot of great things here. Is there anything else that you want to add to this conversation that we haven't shared yet?
I'll add that like you're always going to have an expectation. You just always are. Like they're not to be eliminated. You are a human. You will have expectations. I'm a human. I have expectations. I think this, like what we're talking about here is like, how do you deal with them? Like, how do you take care of yourself? How do you recognize what's your responsibility and what's not your responsibility? I love what Suzette was just saying. Do you deal with them by having a temper tantrum? Sometimes we do. Do you deal with them by accepting them? Do you deal with them by pouting? Do you deal with them by negotiating against yourself? Like, how do you deal with your expectations? So much of this is like becoming aware of it, recognizing your patterns, and then deciding how you want to deal and interact with the very humanness that life brings you. Things like expectations. And I'm just something I will not say, I will say it over and over and over. I don't think you can oversay it. There's not a right or wrong way. Having expectations doesn't mean you're bad. Not even managing them or doing anything about it doesn't mean you're bad or failing. It's just like you get to decide how you want to do this. We're giving you ideas, we're giving you suggestions, we're saying you might want to try this. If you know, take what works for you, leave what doesn't. This is in no way a mandate or the only way of managing relationships or expectations or values or whatever you want to look at it here. But these are like, that's the number one takeaway is like, there's no right or wrong way of doing this. You are always going to have expectations and trial and error. See what works for you. Try some of the ideas that Suzette had. Try some of the ideas that Chris had. Try some of the ideas and just see. And if you don't like them, that's okay too.
Yeah, my final thought is along those lines of you're going to have expectations at least 10 times a day, at least. That's on a good day. I find myself having to rein in my expectations because, we're walking around. We only have our own brain, our own set of eyes, our own motivations. Like we only have the way that we see the world. And so it is just such a natural human tendency to assume that everybody else is doing the same thing or wants the same thing because we're looking through our own set of eyes and our own brain and everything. And so at least 10 times a day, I have to remind myself, oh, they are not me. They're not me. I have to do this with my kids, especially. Like my kids are not me. So they're going to approach things differently. That is okay. I just have to rein in that tendency to just view the world through my lens and my motivations. And I get frustrated. I get frustrated with my husband. Why doesn't he think this way? Why isn't he motivated by what I'm motivated by? And I just have to like stop because he is not me. He's walking around with a different brain and a different set of eyes and a different set of motivations. And I can't control that. And I just have to just rein it in and just tell myself like, he's not me. My kids are not me. I'm going to work with them instead of getting frustrated that they're not me.
Love that. I found a little quote that I love. When we are so attached to plan A, we miss the goodness in plan B. And I just love this because I definitely had a plan A. I thought it was supposed to look like a certain way, and it didn't. And I was so set on that script on what plan A was supposed to look like that it was really hard for me to even look for any of the good in plan B. And once I was able to, kind of look at that, what are my expectations? What can I change here? There has been so much goodness in plan B. Definitely it's different than I thought, but once I could set plan A down, then I was able to see, you know what? Plan B is pretty amazing and I've got amazing kids. I've got an amazing husband and I adore them and I'm thankful to be able to be able to see the beauty in plan B. Anything else anyone wants to add? Okay, well, we want to thank you for being here with us. And I'm getting lots of great feedback. I have a lot of people that say that they just really look forward to these masterminds. And we hope you enjoyed this one and you can look forward to another great mastermind next month. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.
Bye.